live. So, positioning the battle for your mind. Ryan, we are talking about chapter 3 today. Chapter 3, my man, getting into the mind. I feel like we did this last week, but last week was the assault on the
Oh
mind.
God, here's the thumbs up again, man. Keep your hands in your pocket, brother.
Oh my gosh, did it? Like, I didn't even move my hands though.
You just did a thumbs up again. Yeah, put your hands in your pocket. like,
I gotta figure if anyone that's watching or listening knows how to turn all this stuff off on your Mac, please let me know. Um, so I'll do this. I'll do the Bill Clinton.
you need some gloves, man. Let's get some podcast gloves,
Yeah,
man. get
some
some.
big mitts.
Yeah, go get some big mitts. Go get your snowmobile mitts, man, and just put them on. But that's so crazy, man. That like let me. Does that even? No. No thumbs up, man. No thumbs up.
No,
But
I
anyways,
don't
coming
know.
back into chapter 3 of positioning. What's going on, man?
Well, for starters, I mean, right in the second paragraph, um, hits you kind of like right dead center in the forehead because we were talking about this just the other day, and it was funny how it all of a sudden comes up where it's what's called luck is usually an outgrowth of successful communication, saying the right things to the right person at the right time. So what people consider luck is just really work paying off.
Yeah.
I love that. And then he says, positioning is an organized system to find a window in the mind. It's based on the concept of communication can only take place at the right time, under the right circumstances. So, you know, again, Ryan, a lot of this is just reconfirming things we say, right? Enter the conversation where the traffic manager's having it already. Like enter
Mm-hmm.
their mind while they're already having the conversation. Work, do your work, do what you got to do. Eventually, things will pay off. Right. I had a colleague of mine back when I first started. This gentleman I mean, he worked like you. He was a hard worker. He always made his calls every single day. And I remember him coming into my office about 4 years into working. 4 years, Ryan, and he'd not closed any significant deals. And he's like, Dan, I just don't get it. He goes, I'm doing everything. Because it's like everything's against me. And I'm like, and I almost said his name, but I was like, you know, you just got to keep pushing because eventually it will hit. And I think it was at like the 4.5 year mark, everything changed. It just catapulted for this guy. And, you know, I looked at that a lot early in my career and said, really, would I have put 4.5 years, 5 days a week, feeling like you're going nowhere and at that time, there is stress after about 6 months because you're not producing. Will you still have a job? Like it was back in the day of literally like it was almost like hoarding people in, hoarding people out. It was just like this massive turnstile gate that kept coming in and out, and those that didn't succeed would just be gone real quick.
Mm.
At that point in time in those days, no company gave a salesperson like a year to get things going. It was like, listen, we're in the beginning stages of brokerage. It's backhauls. It's supposed to be easy. And, so this guy was worried for like his job, his stability, putting a roof over his head for 4.5 years. And he finally hit. And, I look at something like that and then I read something like this and I say, like, this is what it is. If you really want it, it could take that long, but if you
Yeah.
really want it, then you put in the work to get it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's You bring up a great point because I think it was Brad Leah who mentioned this in terms of discipline, and I think this is it directly correlates to what you just said about that sales rep, where how willing are you to go and make an investment? And he was talking about the gym, right? You go to the gym every single day and not get an instant result, right? So when you think about a salesperson, how willing are you to go and do 100 calls a day or do whatever your prospecting channel is and not see a result? You might see an instant gratification of, hey, can you quote me on this, or like, we can add you to a lead list or some shit like that. But to get a true customer, how long can you go without basically making the deposits before you see any withdrawals done, right? And it's funny because I actually circled that sentence that you're talking about, which is like, the concept of communication that can go at the right time at the right circumstance. And the next part that they talk about was like, like the easiest way to get into a person's mind is to be first. And you know, I think about that a lot with my prospects. I think somebody told me that if you want, if you're doing content or you want to be known on LinkedIn, if you want to build a personal brand, it takes the average person, I think it's like 7 times they have to see you before they can resonate. Okay, like this guy's legit. So you got to make like 7 posts, and that person has to see 7 posts of you all over the place. And then I started to think about why did I start watching like Alex Hormozy and all that stuff, and it was just his content was everywhere. Every single platform I went to, he was just there. So I think like with everybody bringing it back into logistics, like even like we know that we're not going to be first, right? And I don't think it's a race to like, hey, I'm going to be the first email that the customer sees, or that, because we don't control that, right? But I think there's other ways that, you know, when you niche down, or you create, well, the second part of it, which we'll get into in this conversation, where is they're like, hey, if you're in an overcrowded place and you can't be first, then create something that you can be first in, right? So that's where we saw the opportunities, like you were talking when brokerage started, sorry. You got backhauls, and then we've gone to full truckloads, and then you got like LTL reefer now, like you got like final mile, you got all these moving parts where you don't necessarily need to be the first, but you can really become an expert at it, and you know, be top of mind. Because if somebody does LTL, are they going to work with somebody who really hasn't done LTL and they just ship out their rates a day in Ross or Maritime and stuff like that, or somebody who actually has the connections, who does this on a daily, right? That true SME, that subject matter expert.
You know, I love that you said that because when I was reading this, and you know, he talks about the first person that flies solo across the Atlantic, and he says Charles Lindbergh, right? And then who's second? And it's like, well, I don't know. And I I look at it as, is there something I can do or say, or a question I can ask that might put me first?
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's where the mindset has to be. I mean, you're right. You're not going to be the first person to email this person. You're not going to be the first person to call them. Even if the company just opened an hour ago, you're still not going to be the first person,
Yeah,
right?
you're never gonna be.
So, you know, what can we do as sales reps to be the first, to create that, in essence, to create that new opportunity, that blue ocean? Because let's call a spade, Ryan. The ocean of logistics is a blood filled ocean. Like everybody's calling the same people. Most salespeople are saying the same thing. So it's a red ocean. So you can take that same group of people or that same community, and you can create a new opportunity and create your own blue ocean inside that opportunity. And I know that was a
Mm.
lot of ocean talk, and it was more just a matter of saying that, you know, based on the conversations you have, based on the questioning you ask, maybe based on your qualifying process, you know, based on the fact that maybe you come straight out and you say, hey, listen, I deal best with this kind of person. Is that you? If it's not, there's no use of taking this call any further. That's going to be a first for most people, because right now, if they have freight, everybody is their best friend,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's just the season of the industry we're in. And by you coming out and saying, no, 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 hold on, big time out here. I don't want you if you're this, this, and this. I work best with this person. I think you're probably going to be in the front of the pack just by being, for lack of a better term, that blunt. And maybe not as blunt as I said it, because that sounded kind of had a harsh tone to it. But you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
I'd say fuck off. Like I don't care.
yeah,
Who
yeah,
are
yeah,
you,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like, you have no credibility to me. Like I don't give a shit. Like I'll take the
yeah,
next call. Well, I
yeah.
think when they kind
You
of bring it
like
down
beat it.
to, yeah, kick rocks. But I think when they mention that of like being first, and I want everybody to kind of like understand out there, it's not necessarily like we said, not like the prospecting touches or anything like that, but it's just kind of thinking outside of the box, right? Kind
Yes.
of giving those like deposits that you're kind of doing. Like for me, like I'll share. I don't gatekeep, so I'll tell people here. Like for me, like I do a lot of like voice messages to on LinkedIn, and you can only do that through your cell phone. You can't do it on your computer. So I've had responses like my A/B testing is actually pretty high because they're getting back to me. They're like, "Hey, I didn't know you can send out voice notes." You know, so that's at least position. They'd rather listen to that than like read an email that they've read a whole bunch of
Yeah.
times before.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking even with this chapter, it's kind of inspired me to, hey, maybe I should run some ads. You know, run some LinkedIn ads so that, hey, if I send a customer an email or I call them or something like that, hey, boom, the next time they log into something that they use, there's an ad of me with a picture of a truck or something like that, something to kind of differentiate, because I've never seen an ad for a logistics company or a logistics person, to be completely
So
honest.
I did that on LinkedIn. Um, and the beautiful thing about LinkedIn was their targeting is so focused,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I did it. when I was selling, I did it to VPs. I did it to CEOs of manufacturing companies and head salespeople, and I selected a few, and the results that I got were pretty cool. And when I say cool, it's when I called. So I let it like um, I don't know if you call it fester or whatever, but I let it like soak in for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, you gotta
So
let
I
it
ran
nurture.
the
Yeah.
ads to these people for about 2 weeks. I think I put like $200 into it just to see. And this is pre-COVID, so
Mm.
I'd love to run the test again. But when I called them, said, "Hey, it's Dan Deegan calling from XYZ. I wanted to just talk," and they were like, "Hold on, like you're familiar." And
Mm.
I was like, "Hmm." I go, "You might have seen some ads." They go, "Yeah, that's right, that's right. I saw you on LinkedIn. Like you're everywhere." And
Yeah.
it was interesting. I mean, I got two deals out of it, and then COVID started to hit, and I kind of lost total track of it. I really should go back and pull that data because I never finished the test. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But
Hmm.
Ryan, this is something that I played with for 2 years before I tried it because LinkedIn really wasn't there when it comes to conversions, and you really can't do it on a Facebook or an Instagram because it doesn't drill deep. Like LinkedIn,
Well,
you
I
can
think
choose your industry, your titles, you know what I
yeah.
mean? You
Yeah,
can
I think it
choose
would be more for
groups.
link, like kind of like LinkedIn, just because like, and I feel
Mhm.
like for everybody prefacing here, like if it's something that you're gonna do, I highly recommend like because like a lot of people brand new and stuff like that, but I recommend that you do have a following, right? Because you have that like send out requests every day, connect with people, and have conversations because people want that credibility. Anytime I get approached, anytime I get cold called or something like that, and I look up the company and there's no reviews or there's nothing about them, then my alarm goes off, right? So just make sure that you got a following, make sure you have something, and make sure you're putting like these things are free, to have a good LinkedIn profile, or to have like a good like social media profile. So let's say you have an Instagram and stuff like that, and you want to go ahead, like I've played around with TikTok ads and played around with Instagram ads for my own stuff, and I've seen great results because it's just opening, and I think the analytics now, Dan, are a lot better,
Yes.
especially since Meta's kind of taken over because I'm able to kind of see, okay, the accounts it's touched, the reach that it's had, like how many people saved it, and it would give me a lead list, and that's why I don't know if anybody kind of watches here. I watch a lot of tech webinars. I don't think there really is any logistics webinars, but I watch a lot of tech webinars, and they always ask you for like your email and your phone number and all that stuff, and they'll let like the webinar happen, and then like a week later, like you're talking about nest, like a nurture, they'll reach out, say, hey, hope you enjoyed it. By the way, if you want to chat, let's chat. Here's a clip, here's a replay of the webinar,
Mhm.
so they're making a deposit with you, and from there, and I think these are the ways that we can truly differentiate from everybody that's going on right now. Like Dan, you were so right that it's a blood infested ocean where everybody wants business. I was on an RFP call yesterday, a kickoff call, and full transparency here, like there was, I think there was 127 lanes. I want to say 1200 to 1300 total volume with this customer. Dan, I probably counted maybe like 82 people on that chat.
Yeah.
So I'm like, God bless, and they weren't. I was like, I got to be a part of this because I go through due diligence, and they are a complete prospect, so they're not somebody that I'd be working with right now. But I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, is this gonna be worth my time? Like, how am I gonna be first when I read this book? And I'm like, do I need to be first? I'm like, maybe not. I'll still
Mhm.
take my shot. Always take your shots. Like, you just
Mhm.
never know, right? But don't be that person where like, oh my God, I just got an RFP and I'm gonna win the freight and things like that. It's just not feasible. But coming back to it, I think everybody should think outside the box and definitely get ads or do something different. Like Anthony, who's in the comments this morning, he was a big believer of being, what is it, the magician of shipping. I think that was his like moniker or something like that. And I think it still is. And it's cool because you want to differentiate. That's why
Yeah.
Dan goes by HBLS and then like Bridger, and then I go by Logistics Monkey. Just do something more other than than what everybody else is doing. I think, Dan, one last comment. I was looking at LinkedIn LinkedIn posts. So they're talking about building a brand, and I don't know if you know this, Dan, but you are in the 1% of LinkedIn users if you only post once a week. So think about that, right? We all want to be in the 1% of everything. I think that's like one of the buzzwords for the past couple of years and all that stuff. But think about being, how can I be the 1% in my logistics managers, like their case of the users, of the people that they get. Well, try different things, or try different things, or like we said, post on Instagram, on LinkedIn, build up that audience a little bit, and then maybe go for the ads, send some voice notes, send some videos, have some fun with it, because it's such a great industry to get into, and people could really learn, especially from this book that we're reading right now.
Well, I love that. And the I like the fact that right after they talk about, being first, kind of, having your own flow, they go right into what counts most is receptivity. Two
Mm,
people meet in a situation which both are receptive to the idea, but most have open windows. This is neither is deeply in love with someone or someone else. And I totally hacked that paragraph. But anyways, what in essence it's saying is what Ryan and I have said again, and I'm using this book because I want to make sure all of you really understand. Like, if the person's not receptive to what we're trying to share with them, there's really no use, in my opinion. And I know some salespeople will disagree with me,
yeah.
but I've had so many situations where I've spent months trying to convince somebody that I can help them lean out their logistics, to convince somebody I can solve the problems. And in their head, if they're not of the same opinion, and this happened a lot about mid career, where things were really shifting in the markets. Things were really happening. The Canadian dollar, US dollar was going wonky. And a lot of people had set up logistics programs, and you could not tell them, you could not show them that you had a better solution because they spent so much of their own time setting it up.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, in conversations with people, when they're open to that message, your sales goes smoother. And so the point of this chapter is, how do you get into those windows where they're open to your information, and they're open to your sales, if you will. They're open to what you're doing. And Ryan, that to me was kind of one of the big things when they start talking about the hard way into the mind and the easy way into the mind, and then advertising and learning lessons and all this kind of stuff. He says, but make sure you find something to be first in. It's better to be a big fish in a small pond than increase the size of the pond to be a small fish in a big pond. And that's
Yeah.
not an industry. That's like what Ryan said. Find something that makes you stand out, because all of a sudden you become the big fish in the small pond.
Yeah.
And it's about that perception, right? It's about that positioning that you have to help you do that. And that for me, this chapter was all about that. Like,
Yeah.
and then they dive obviously into the lessons in
Brand
advertising
name.
and the
Yeah.
product era and all that. But it's this book was really like, how do I find those windows to share my new opportunity with my prospects? And
Yeah.
that's really what I started looking at, and I started focusing on it and saying, okay, what are the windows? Like, to me, there's a window from now till January. And there's a window from now till January because if you're talking about specific things, right? There's a window from January to February if you're talking about specific things. There's a window from February to March. And then, as a lot of the experts are saying, like kind of end of Q1, things are going to start turning around. So now we've got a window from November to the end of Q1
Yeah.
that I think if you reposition yourself just a little bit, you're going to see massive results.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think that is so like there's power in that. I want the audience who's watching and listening on the replay and things like that to understand what Dan just said. There is an opportunity right now, and you got to find your window. I think opportunities everywhere, man. And I know this is a logistics show and stuff like that, but I just relate this to like life itself, Dan. Like there's
Yeah.
really, I learned this week, Dan, that money is actually everywhere. And I just want to share a quick story. I watched a video on YouTube. It was kind of like side hustles and things like that. And one of the it was like 10 top side hustles from this guy I follow and things like that. And one of them was like, if you create like a gig on like Fiverr for like doing like Amazon reviews, so like unboxing reviews and stuff like that. And like Dan, like no word of a lie, I signed up on, I think it was Sunday, and I got my first 2 orders on Tuesday. and they're completely like different. And the reason why I'm making this comment is just that, you know, when you position yourself that you're one of in a space that nobody conquers, you can kind of control that. And Dan talks about the seasons too. I'm a true believer in like if you operate in your season. So Dan's saying like the seasons from like now to December, January to February, and then obviously end of Q1 into November. If you operate like a true professional, like gear down, bear down, and actually really work for like the next like quarters or so like that, this can be your life forever. And I think that's what we get mixed up with logistics. And this was one lesson I learned from my first boss, Dan, was that, you know, you really put in the work, let's say, and I tell this to all reps out there, you know, you really put in the work for like 6 to 12 months. I really think it's 6 months to really build a book of business. This could really be your life forever, you know? So why wouldn't you want to do that? And, you know, there's another part in this chapter, Dan, where they're talking about like brand, like don't give your brand a generic name. And I started to think about that too, right? It's just like, ourselves. Gary Vee did a video last week, Dan, where he talks about in 2024, it's all going to be about content creation, but people are going to be known as like media agency. So Sales Chatter is going to be a media agency. Dan Deigan is going to be a media agency. Me, Logistics Monk, we're going to be media agencies because that's what people want to see and that's what the future is. So when you're thinking about the name is just as important as positioning, maybe even more important. So look at that. Even if you fly your flag for like a company that you work with, be that name within that company, you know, understand what like the true strengths and things like that. But I really think it's awesome for with everybody kind of going on. So operate in your season. I thought that was great advice, Dan.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks. And I mean, it's true, right? And I love that you brought up the fact of working and then realizing the results. You know, I truly believe if you devote 12 to 24 months to this industry, your life will change in so many ways. Like
Yeah.
it would be,
Well,
it is crazy, but it's
I would even
devotion,
shorten that. Right? I would even
dedication.
shorten that. Yeah, I would shorten that because like I find, and Damon's in the comments here, he can attest to this because he owns a logistics company. You know, the new reps who don't have any idea, so they have no baggage, fresh out of college, fresh out of anything from complete different industry. Because I saw this at different companies I work with. The people who came in and just soak it like a sponge and like, okay, you said no now, okay, can hang up the phone, let me go call another. They closed business because they were just putting in the work, they were putting in the reps, right? So I really think like 3 to 6 months, you know, and I really think so. If you're a brand new person and you're not seeing results in 3 months, like if you haven't seen a quote in 3 months, you have to look at your strategy and realize that realistically, you're probably not putting in the work. You know, like how many times do you and I, Dan, when we're like, oh my God, we're so busy, we look back at the day and we're like, holy shit, we only did the podcast. You know, but you kind of think of it in the mix of things, right? But I think like 12 to 24 months, man, that's definitely long term, and we think in decades, like we always kind of talk about. But I really think 3 to 6 months, because you know what, Dan? It's when you get that first customer, no matter what, even if their transaction doesn't matter. That first time, it's like your first kiss, right? It's that first time of sending the credit app and booking the carrier, and you know everybody as the manager, they're always so excited to walk you through that process. Right? You remember your first. I remember my first. I remember when Jeff was on, when we did the show, his first customer was the same as mine, balsamic vinaigrette. You know, and it was just like, you know, you always remember your first. So it's just momentum, right? And I think when you get that first commission paycheck, that's where like, how many zeros are on here? And then you realize you hate the government for how many taxes they take off. But yeah, I definitely think
So
like,
here's where I come from with 12 to 24 months. I think 1 to 6 months, you can create a business. 12 to 24 months, it's a career. And the reason I say that is because your first 6 months, you're experimenting with the idea of really who is a good customer, right? You're trying to get business, you're trying to put numbers on the board. So you start making commission checks. Or sorry, let me rephrase it. You start making checks, right? I think within a year to 2 years, with that same effort you put in the first 6 months, you start really defining who's the best people I can work with, or the industries, right? Like I for the first couple of years of my career, I would just take anything. And then I started really getting defined. So I went into pharmaceuticals and tech, and just
yeah,
electronics and pharmaceuticals was my go-to. That's when I started to have a career. That's when I started to really realize who's really a good customer for me long term instead of this churn. Like every 3 months, you're trying to close more deals just to maintain that same baseline
I
that you were
see.
doing, right?
Yeah.
So
That's
your
surf and
finances
turf,
don't go down.
that's surf and turf
Yeah,
on that Friday, brother.
yeah,
But you know
yeah.
what, Dan? I had a lot more fun when I was all over the board, though. I don't know. I found pleasure in that because, like,
Yeah.
I would go from like onions to like doing pork to doing like piping for the zoo to balsamic vinaigrette. Like, I was doing anything and everything, and I got that's where I kind of realized and. It's I don't know I love that being all over the place. Now I'm more niche down and more focused because
Yes.
I consider myself an expert. But I'm not gonna lie, man. Those like especially at the companies I work with, like those were some really fun times, man. Like it's
I
kind of
think
cool.
those are the seasons you're in,
Yeah. Well, not
right?
even.
Like
I
if we
think
think about it again, you're brand new in the industry, right? So you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's like the first time you see one of the products you shipped in a store. Like
yeah,
it blows your friggin' mind. You're like,
yeah.
I made that happen. Like I remember when I first saw wrapping paper in Walmart that I brought to the Walmart. And I was like, and I'm watching these kids run up to it and they're like, holding up, mom, can we have that? And I'm like, I love this industry. Like this
Kids
is
actually do that
super
for wrapping
cool.
paper, like unless like
Yeah.
Paw Patrol. Oh, was it like
Yeah,
kids
no, no,
like
no.
wrapping
It
paper?
was like
Oh.
my first customer was wrapping paper plus Mark. And my second customer was Clio Wrap, the second largest wrapping paper company. Both of them own the North American market. So for 3 years, the first 3 years of my career, any wrapping paper that you touched, I shipped.
You should call
And
them,
it
man,
was
and do an
crazy,
update for
Ryan.
the
It was
show.
super cool. Like
Yeah,
it
you should
was
call them and get an update, man. That'd be so cool. Like
well,
if you call
so
them right
they've
now
been
and see what
bought
they.
by American Greetings, but
Oh,
which is
boo.
bought by Hallmark. But it's yeah, you know what I might. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
think
just for
Doug
fun, man. Just shoot
Derryberry's
the
around
shit, right?
anymore. But yeah, and I mean, so it was one of these things where that was my Christmas bonus, right? Because it
Mm.
started at the middle of so probably the last week of October till about the 10th of December. And that was the time. That's the only time period they shipped. I mean, they had a bit because Plusmark would create the Hallmark cards for like Valentine's Day and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
okay, okay, okay. So it was
So
year,
there
it
was
was
small
seasonal, season.
shipments.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so it was, but they created the wrapping paper, and so watching, and it would all come to our dock in Montreal, and we would distribute it from there. So it
Mhm.
was like very hands on. So you're watching boxes of wrapping paper come in, and I'm sitting there thinking, why are those boxes so big? Because they're actually built in displays. So then Walmart just pulls the top off, and there's your wrapping paper, and that was probably that was the time when it hooked, like when
Yeah.
the industry hooked for me. I was like,
Well, you
because you
positioned it
never
too,
give
right?
any thought to how things get.
Yeah,
Well, I
you
didn't,
never know.
anyways.
Yeah, I didn't because well, the first customer I had, it was cool because they were in BC and they did like balsamic vinegar and regret. They were, and funny enough, I only got them because like I watched Dragon's Den and I called them next day, but that's another story. But they were actually doing road
No, it's a
shows,
great
like
place for leads, actually,
Shark
buddy.
Tank. I love Shark Tank and stuff like that. For that, but they were doing road shows in Costco. Like, and funny enough, like I was shipping all those partial shipments, and one of them was in Pickering, which is like 5 minutes from me. So for me, positioning wise, getting back to the book, I made sure to be there for literally. I was there for the 3 days. Like even they were there for the full 3, and they're like, "You again?" I was like, "Yeah, of course." And I took selfies with the people, with the product, all that. So like, I was the biggest fan and the biggest supporter for those 3 days, and I sent it to my customers like, "Ah, rah, rah, rah!" Like this is so cool. So for everybody out there, this is a way that you truly build relationships. You get to, I'm obviously at the front of my customer's mind because I'm the only one sending them like selfies and stuff like that. They were probably
Buddy,
working with
you
other
just turned
people, but
yourself into number one. You
there
turned
we
yourself
go.
into the first person, and all you did was you stepped up one level of your game,
But we thought it
and
was the bare
you
minimum.
took
Yeah.
selfies, and then you sent it to them, and you showed up 3 days in a row, and nobody's done that, so you're the first. And then you sent those selfies to the guys that make the decision, and nobody's done that, so you're the first. You're the Lynchenberg.
And
You're the guy that just flew across North Atlantic the first time.
there we
That
go.
you created your own blue ocean.
I should call them. You know what?
You
You should
should.
call the paper company. I'm gonna call these guys after. Well, when
Do you
it's
still have that picture?
sorry, no, no, no. That was like on my iPhone like 4. Like I don't even think they even have. I don't even think they're probably even still working there.
I would
Well,
check
no,
your
it's a family
iCloud.
business.
I would check
Yeah,
your iCloud. I'd check any, because if you had that picture, that would be like
yeah,
insane cool. Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can reach out to Plusmark today and
yeah.
see
Why
what's going
not?
on
Let's
there. And
just
then
do it.
why
And
don't we
everybody out
touch
there,
back and
reach out to
see?
your first customer. Even if you're not
Yeah.
doing business with them anymore,
Yep.
that's the message today. Reach out to your first customer, see what they're up to.
Yeah. I like that. I
All
like
right.
that. That's cool. Let's do that. So, in closing, buddy, I know we're 11:11. Make a wish, everybody.
Make a wish, baby.
Um, they kind of end the book, or end the chapter, discussing about the positioning era. They go into a few different stories about like Michelob and that kind of stuff, where they, and what Miller High Life discovered, and all this kind of stuff. So we won't get into that part of it, but the positioning era is really where we are now.
Hmm.
Um, I think if you guys are not positioning yourself in the market, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. Um, I really think so. Anthony's asking about how successful people think by John Maxwell. A great book.
Yeah, I
And
never
the
read that.
14 Laws of Success by John Maxwell is another fantastic book, too. Anthony, I suggest you take your wife's advice and read some pages of the
Always,
book.
man. Always take their advice, brother.
Yeah.
That's the golden
Yeah.
rule.
It will help you digest it, use the tools, use the strategies in it, and it's going to help you, brother, for sure.
Yeah, or even listen to the audiobook. I learned that from Damon.
Yeah.
Listen to audiobooks a lot more.
Yeah.
They are
Or
wonderful.
even do the old Hermosi, listen to the audiobook while you're reading. That is
Woo-wee.
actually really good. I did that for The Power of Now, and it was
Love that.
awesome. 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 All right, everybody. Have a great weekend.
See you
Ryan,
guys Monday.
let's get positioning.